Single dad janitor, outsmarted hackers, in 10 seconds the CEO looked at him differently after that. A night worker, everyone ignored, yanked a cord, stopped $1 million heist in silence. Then the richest woman in the room locked eyes with him and saw a truth no one was ready for. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Jack Harlan guided his mop across the gleaming marble floors of SteelTech's lobby. Back and forth, the familiar motion had become almost meditative after 15 years on the job. The night shift suited him. Fewer people meant fewer stares, fewer awkward moments when executives in $1,000 suits would look right through him like he was part of the furniture. "Almost done here," he murmured to himself, wringing out the mop one last time. The lobby's gold and chrome fixtures gleamed in the dim evening light, reflecting his tired face back at him. At 48, the years of physical labor had left their mark, silver threading through his dark hair, laugh lines deepening around his eyes. Jack started humming an old Beatles song, "Hey Jude," smiling as he remembered how Emily had been practicing it on her guitar just that morning. His 14-year-old daughter was the bright spot in his world, filling their small apartment with music and laughter despite all the hardships they'd faced since losing her mother. "You should hear her play now," he said softly to Sarah's memory, as he often did during these quiet night shifts. "She's got your talent, that's for sure. Not my tone-deaf genes." The massive digital clock above the security desk showed 11:42 p.m. Emily would be finishing her homework about now, probably curled up on their worn couch with her textbook spread around her like a paper nest. She never went to bed until he got home, no matter how many times he told her she needed her rest. Jack wheeled his cart toward the supply closet, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The night security guard, Marcus, gave him a friendly nod from behind his desk. At least Marcus saw him. They'd shared countless cups of coffee over the years, swapping stories about their kids and commiserating about working nights. "Looking good out there, Jack," Marcus called out. "I can see my reflection in those floors." "Thanks, Marcus. How's Delia doing with her college applications?" "Driving me and her mama crazy with rewrites of her essays, but she's got her heart set on NYU." Jack smiled, thinking of Emily's own academic ambitions. She was only a freshman in high school, but already talking about medical school. The thought made his chest tight, not with doubt in her abilities, but with worry about how he'd ever afford it on a janitor's salary. He stored his cleaning supplies carefully, everything in its place, just as he liked it. The routine brought him comfort, even if it reminded him of his invisible status in this gleaming tower of success. During the day, these halls buzzed with energy. Programmers, executives, and investors rushing about in their expensive clothes, clutching their lattes and tablets. At night, it was just him and his mop, making sure everything was perfect for another day of being overlooked. The elevator dinged softly as Jack pressed the button for the executive floor. His final task of the night was always cleaning the corner offices. The car rose smoothly, and he watched the floor numbers tick by, thinking about Emily's upcoming science fair project. She'd been collecting data on urban air quality, setting up sensors around their neighborhood. His girl was going to change the world someday. He just knew it. The thought warmed him as he pushed his cart out onto the 40th floor. The view from up here always took his breath away. The city spread out below like a carpet of stars, buildings reaching toward the heavens. He paused for a moment, pressing his hand against the floor-to-ceiling window. Somewhere out there, in one of those twinkling lights, was their apartment, where Emily was waiting. "Better get moving," he muttered, turning away from the view. The faster he finished, the sooner he could get home. The executive floor was silent, except for the soft whir of the climate control system. Jack's cart squeaked slightly as he pushed it down the hallway, past closed office doors with important names etched in brushed steel. He'd memorized them all over the years. Veronica Steele, CEO, Michael Chen, CFO, Sarah Williams, Head of Development. Something caught his eye as he passed one of the glass-walled conference rooms, the soft blue glow of a laptop screen. It wasn't unusual for employees to work late, but this room was empty. The laptop sat abandoned on the polished conference table, its screen alive with activity. Jack paused, frowning. He'd developed a sixth sense about things being out of place after so many years on the job. Something about this didn't feel right. Moving closer, he peered at the screen through the glass wall. Lines of code were scrolling rapidly, filling window after window. Files were disappearing from folders, only to be replaced by others with strange names. Jack didn't know much about computers, but he'd cleaned around enough programmers to know this wasn't normal. A chill ran down his spine as he watched the screen continue its frantic activity. Whatever was happening, he had a feeling it wasn't good. The harsh glow of the laptop screen cast eerie shadows across the executive floor as Jack leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the handle of his mop. Something wasn't right. The screen flickered with rapid streams of text and numbers, moving too fast for his eyes to follow. But after years of cleaning offices, he'd seen enough computer screens to know this wasn't normal. His heart thumped against his ribs as he stepped closer, abandoning his mop. The expensive leather chairs and polished mahogany desk seemed to loom around him in the dim light. He didn't belong here among the trappings of corporate power, but he couldn't look away from that screen. Files were disappearing. One by one, folders vanished from view like cards in a magic trick. Jack's throat went dry. He'd seen Emily do enough homework on their old desktop to recognize when something was being deleted, but this was different, faster, more aggressive. "This ain't right," he muttered, wiping his palms on his gray uniform pants. The corporate training videos they made him watch every year flashed through his mind, the ones about security and protecting company information. Most folks dozed through them, but Jack always paid attention. He respected his job, even if others didn't respect him. The screen continued its frenzied dance of disappearing data. Jack's hands hovered uncertainly over the keyboard. He wasn't supposed to touch the computers. That was made very clear during orientation. But something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him and Emily afloat all these years, screamed that this was an emergency. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. What if he was wrong? He could lose his job. Emily's braces, her college fund, their tiny apartment. Everything depended on this paycheck. But what if he was right? More files vanished. Whatever was happening, it was picking up speed. Jack's eyes darted to the power cord snaking from the laptop to the wall outlet. Simple solutions, that's what he knew. When something's broken, first thing you do is unplug it. Without giving himself time to second guess, Jack lunged forward and yanked the cord from the wall. The screen went black instantly, plunging the office into darkness, broken only by the safety lights along the baseboards. The sudden silence felt deafening. Jack stood frozen, the warm power cord still clutched in his trembling hand. Had he just made a huge mistake? Or had he? A piercing alarm shattered the quiet. Red emergency lights began pulsing along the walls, filling the space with crimson shadows. Jack's heart nearly stopped as heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. The double doors burst open. Security guards in dark uniforms poured in, their flashlights cutting through the red-tinted darkness. "Don't move," one shouted, training his beam directly on Jack's face. Jack raised his hand slowly, still holding the power cord. "I work here," he said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I'm the night janitor. Something was wrong with the computer." "Step away from the desk," another guard commanded. Jack complied, taking careful steps backward until his legs hit his abandoned mop cart. More footsteps approached, these ones sharp and purposeful against the marble floor. The guards parted as a woman strode through their midst. Even in the pulsing red light, Jack recognized Veronica Steele, CEO of SteelTech. He'd never seen her this close before, usually glimpsing her only from a respectful distance as he polished floors or emptied trash bins. Her tailored suit and perfectly styled hair seemed at odds with the late hour. Her expression was thunder as she surveyed the scene, the dark laptop, the scattered guards, and Jack standing between them with the power cord still dangling from his fingers. "What happened here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the wail of the alarms. Her eyes locked onto Jack with laser intensity. "Why are you touching executive equipment?" Jack swallowed hard. Under her fierce gaze, he felt every bit the lowly janitor he was, but he forced himself to meet her eyes. Ma'am, I was doing my regular rounds when I noticed something strange on the computer. Files were disappearing real fast, like they were being deleted or stolen. I didn't know what else to do, so I unplugged it." "You unplugged it?" she repeated, her tone sharp with disbelief. "Just like that?" "Yes, ma'am." Jack's fingers tightened around the cord. "I know I'm not supposed to touch the computers, but it didn't look right. Something bad was happening. I could feel it." Veronica's eyes narrowed as she studied him. The alarm continued to shriek overhead, making Jack's temples throb. Finally, she turned to one of the guards. "Get it up here! Now!" The guard spoke rapidly into his radio, while Veronica continued to stare at Jack. He resisted the urge to shrink back, to apologize for overstepping. Emily's face flashed in his mind, her proud smile whenever he managed to fix something broken in their apartment. That gave him strength. "I think I stopped something bad," he said quietly, meeting Veronica's gaze. "I hope I did the right thing." The boardroom lights hummed overhead as Jack sat rigid in one of the expensive leather chairs, his cleaning uniform feeling out of place among the suits and blazers surrounding him. His calloused hands rested on the smooth mahogany table, and he fought the urge to wipe them on his pants. Veronica Steele stood at the head of the table, her tailored navy suit as crisp as her voice. "So, Mr. Harlan, you expect us to believe that you, a janitor, just happened to stop a sophisticated cyber attack?" Her perfectly arched eyebrow rose with skepticism. Jack swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I just saw something that didn't look right." The screen was filling up with weird code, and files were disappearing. He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I've cleaned these offices for 7 years now. I know what normal computer screens look like." A young man in thick-rimmed glasses, Marcus from IT, according to his badge, cleared his throat. "Miss Steele, if I may." He tapped rapidly on his tablet. "The logs confirm Mr. Harlan's account. At exactly 11:42 p.m., there was an aggressive data extraction attempt on Mr. Peterson's workstation. The attack was terminated at 11:43 p.m. when the power supply was disconnected." Veronica's sharp gaze cut to Marcus. "And the damage?" "That's just it," Marcus said, his voice rising with excitement. "By disconnecting the power when he did, Mr. Harlan prevented the attackers from accessing our core servers. They only managed to grab some non-sensitive marketing files." He adjusted his glasses. "If the laptop had stayed connected for even another minute, they would have breached our firewall and accessed everything: client data, financial records, proprietary tech specs. We're talking potential losses in the millions." The room fell silent. Jack felt the weight of every eye on him, but he kept his gaze fixed on his hands. He didn't feel like a hero, he just did what seemed right at the time. "How did you know to pull the plug?" Veronica's voice had lost some of its edge, but her eyes remained sharp. "Do you have any background in computers?" Jack shook his head. "No, ma'am. But my daughter Emily, she's 14, she's always on her laptop. Sometimes when it freezes up, pulling the plug is the only way to stop it." He gave a small shrug. "I figured maybe it would work here too." A few chuckles rippled through the room, quickly silenced by Veronica's stern look. She turned to another executive, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses. "Howard, what's your assessment?" Howard shuffled through some papers. "The timing was crucial. Our security systems would have caught the breach eventually, but by then, the damage would have been catastrophic. Mr. Harlan's quick thinking saved us from a PR nightmare and potentially millions in losses." Veronica began pacing, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "And you're certain you didn't recognize anyone in the area? Didn't see anyone suspicious?" "No, ma'am," Jack replied. "The floor was empty, like usual, just me and my mop." He tried to smile, but it felt weak. Marcus spoke up again, his fingers flying over his tablet. "The attack originated externally, but they had inside help. Someone left that laptop logged in deliberately. We're tracking the digital fingerprints now." Veronica stopped pacing and leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. "Mr. Harlan, do you understand that what happened tonight is strictly confidential? This doesn't leave this room." "Yes, ma'am." Jack nodded firmly. "I understand. Good." Veronica straightened up and turned to Howard. "I want a full security audit by morning. Marcus, work with your team to trace that breach. I want to know who's behind this." The executives began gathering their things, the meeting clearly over. Jack stood uncertainly, not sure if he should leave or wait to be dismissed. His shift wasn't over for another hour, and the third floor still needed mopping. "Mr. Harlan." Veronica's voice stopped him as he reached for the door. The room had emptied except for the two of them. He turned back, trying not to fidget under her intense gaze. For a long moment, she just looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. The ice in her eyes thawed slightly, and her rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly. "What you did tonight," she said quietly. "It showed both quick thinking and integrity. Those aren't common traits." She paused, studying him with new interest. "We'll talk again." The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Jack's old sedan pulled into the parking spot outside their modest apartment building. The early morning light cast long shadows across the cracked concrete, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery down the street. His muscles ached from the night's work, but there was a different energy coursing through him today, something that felt like pride. As he climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, Jack could already hear movement inside. The door opened before he could reach for his keys, and there stood Emily, her school uniform already on, and her dark hair neatly braided. "Dad?" She wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. "You're later than usual. I was getting worried." Jack breathed in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Sorry, sweetheart. It was an unusual night." Emily pulled back, studying his face with keen eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Something happened, didn't it? You've got that look." "Let me sit down first," Jack said with a tired smile. "And what's that smell? French toast?" Emily beamed, leading him to their small kitchen table. "I woke up early and thought you might be hungry." The kitchen was warm and inviting, despite its worn linoleum floor and dated cabinets. 2 plates of golden brown French toast sat waiting, dusted with powdered sugar, a special treat they usually saved for weekends. "You didn't have to do this," Jack said, sinking into his chair. "Well, I couldn't sleep anyway. Too much geometry homework on my mind." Emily sat across from him, leaning forward eagerly. "Now spill it, Dad. What happened?" Jack cut into his French toast, buying time to find the right words. "You know how I always tell you to trust your gut when something feels wrong?" Emily nodded. Fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Well, I was cleaning the executive floor tonight, and I saw something strange on someone's computer. It looked wrong. Files were disappearing, and there was all this code I didn't understand." He took a bite of toast, savoring the sweetness. "So, I pulled the plug." "You what?" Emily's eyes widened. "I unplugged the computer, turns out." Jack shook his head, still hardly believing it himself. "Turns out I stopped some kind of hacker attack. The CEO herself came down, you know, Veronica Steele." Emily gasped. "The Veronica Steele? The one who's always in the business news?" "That's her. She wasn't too happy at first, but then the tech team confirmed what happened. They said I probably saved the company millions of dollars." Emily jumped up from her chair, nearly knocking over her glass of orange juice. "Oh my God, Dad! You're a hero!" She hugged him from behind, squeezing tight. "I knew it! I always knew you were amazing, and now everyone else knows it too." Jack felt his cheeks warm. "I don't know about hero, sweetheart. I just did what seemed right at the time." "No, this is huge." Emily rushed to their tiny laundry closet, flinging open the door. "We need to make sure you look extra nice tonight." "They're going to look at you differently now." She began rifling through his hanging shirts. "Where's that light blue one? The one without any stains?" "Emily, I'm still just the janitor," Jack protested weakly, but she was already pulling out the shirt. "You're not just anything, Dad." She held the shirt up critically. "I'll iron this before I leave for school. Miss Steele might want to talk to you again, and you should look your best." Jack watched his daughter fuss over his shirt, her face glowing with pride, and felt something crack inside his chest. For years, he'd seen that same pride in her eyes, even when others looked right through him. Even when the parents of her school friends made thinly veiled comments about his job, or when store clerks treated him differently once they knew what he did for a living. "Come here," he said softly. Emily laid the shirt aside and came to him. He pulled her into another hug, remembering when she was small enough to lift onto his shoulders. "You know what makes me feel like a hero?" he whispered. "Having you for a daughter." She squeezed him tighter. "You've always been my hero, Dad. Now other people are just catching up." They finished breakfast together, Emily chattering excitedly about how she couldn't wait to tell her best friend Sarah about what happened. Jack tried to temper her enthusiasm, reminding her that it might not be such a big deal tomorrow, but her joy was infectious. After breakfast, Emily insisted on ironing his shirt, while Jack took a quick shower. When he emerged, the shirt was hanging pressed and perfect on his bedroom door. "Time for bed, young lady," he said, noting the time. "You need some sleep before school." Emily yawned, the excitement finally giving way to tiredness. "Promise you'll tell me everything that happens tonight?" "Promise." He followed her to her room, watching as she climbed into bed still fully dressed in her uniform. "You planning to sleep in that?" She giggled and kicked off her shoes. "I guess not." She snuggled under her covers, uniform and all. "Wake me before you leave for work?" "Always do." Jack tucked the blanket around her shoulders, just like he had when she was little. "Sweet dreams, Emmy." "Love you, Dad," she mumbled, already drifting off. Jack quietly closed her door and went to his own room. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting patterns on his bed. He lay down, still in his work clothes, too wired to sleep despite his exhaustion. For the first time in years, he felt something different stirring in his chest. Not just pride in his daughter, which was constant as the sun, but pride in himself. The way Veronica Steele had looked at him at the end of that meeting really looked at him kept playing in his mind. Not as a nameless figure in a uniform, but as a person who had made a difference. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe he did matter, not just to her, but to the world. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. He touched the pressed shirt hanging on his door, smiling at Emily's careful attention to every wrinkle. His eyelids grew heavy as the events of the night caught up with him. For once, the worries that usually plagued his pre-sleep thoughts, bills, Emily's college fund, the car's mysterious new rattle, seemed distant and manageable. Tonight, he would put on that crisp blue shirt and walk into work with his head held just a little higher. Jack shifted uncomfortably in the plush leather chair, feeling out of place in the gleaming conference room. His clean but worn uniform stood in stark contrast to the crisp suits and silk ties surrounding him. The executive boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and mahogany table, made him feel like a splash of mud on a pristine canvas. 6 pairs of eyes studied him intently. Veronica Steele sat at the head of the table, her sharp gaze fixed on him. To her right, 3 IT specialists huddled over laptops, while 2 security officers stood near the door. "Mr. Harlan," Veronica began, her voice measured, "please walk us through exactly what you observed last night." Jack cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Well, ma'am, I was doing my usual rounds on the executive floor, around 2 a.m., I think." "And what caught your attention?" one of the IT specialists asked, his fingers poised over his keyboard. "It was the sound first," Jack explained, sitting up straighter. "You know how computers usually hum? This one was different, like when my daughter's laptop fan gets stuck, sort of a stuttering noise." The IT specialists exchanged glances, making quick notes. "Then I saw the screen," Jack continued, gaining confidence as he recalled the details. Files were disappearing real fast, like someone was erasing them. But it wasn't normal. You know how when you delete something there's usually that little progress bar? This was different. Just gone. "Can you be more specific about the files?" another specialist pressed. Jack's brow furrowed in concentration. They had weird names, not like regular documents, lots of numbers, and they all started with PR, something. This triggered a flurry of typing from the IT team. Veronica leaned forward slightly, her expression intense. "The cursor?" Jack added. "It wasn't moving like someone was controlling it. More like when my daughter plays those automated computer games. Too precise, too fast." "A script," one of the IT specialists muttered. He's describing a automated deletion script, Jack continued, his voice growing steadier. And there was this little window in the corner, kept showing different numbers, changed every few seconds. An IP address tracker, another specialist noted, sounding impressed. I just knew it wasn't right, Jack said simply. When something's wrong in a building, you can feel it. Like when a pipe's about to burst or an AC unit's failing. This felt wrong the same way. Veronica stood up and walked to the window, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Mr. Harlan, your quick thinking saved this company from losing crucial project data worth millions. The FBI has confirmed this was a sophisticated cyber attack. Jack's face flushed. I just did what seemed right, ma'am. Sometimes, that's all it takes, she replied, turning to face him. We'd like you to work with our security team. Your unique perspective could be valuable. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Ma'am, you notice things others might miss, she explained. You know this building's rhythms, its patterns. That knowledge just proved more valuable than any security protocol. One of the IT specialists spoke up. We'd like you to do regular walkthroughs with us, point out anything unusual. Sometimes the simplest observations are the most important. Jack thought of Emily, of how proud she'd been this morning. I'd be happy to help, but I still need to do my regular work. My daughter. We'll adjust your schedule, Veronica interrupted. And you'll be compensated for the additional responsibilities. For the first time since entering the room, Jack felt his shoulders relax slightly. Thank you, ma'am. The meeting continued for another hour, with Jack describing every detail he could remember. The IT team hung on his words, translating his simple observations into technical terms that meant nothing to him. When it finally ended, Jack stood up, his legs stiff from sitting so long in the unfamiliar chair. As he walked through the hallway toward the service elevator, something strange happened. People noticed him. A woman from accounting nodded and smiled. Two men in suits actually stepped aside to let him pass. A security guard gave him a respectful, "Evening, Mr. Harlan." Each acknowledgement felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Emily's words from that morning echoed in his mind. Dad, you're a hero. But as Jack reached for the elevator button, his calloused finger hovering over the worn plastic, doubt crept back in. He was still just a janitor, wasn't he? One lucky moment didn't change that. The gleaming offices around him, the expensive suits, the important meetings, this wasn't his world. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Jack stepped inside. His reflection in the polished metal walls showed the same tired man who'd been mopping floors for years. The same uniform, the same worn features, the same invisible man he'd always been. Yet something had changed. The eyes that looked back at him held a glimmer of something new, a spark of recognition, perhaps. Or maybe just the first faint light of possibility. The afternoon sun streamed through the break room windows, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. Jack pushed his cleaning cart past the half-open door, slowing his pace as familiar voices drifted out. Did you hear? They had him in the executive meeting this morning, a woman's voice said, dripping with disdain. A janitor? In the boardroom? Another voice scoffed. It's embarrassing. What will our clients think? Jack's shoulders tensed, his knuckles whitening on the cart handle. He'd known this was coming. The whispers, the judgment. He'd lived with them for years. But somehow, after the brief taste of respect he'd experienced, they stung more sharply now. I mean, sure, he got lucky once, the first voice continued. But come on, this is Steel Tech, not some charity case. Jack forced himself to keep moving, though each step felt heavier than the last. The voices faded behind him, but their words echoed in his mind. He rounded the corner toward the executive floor, only to freeze at the sight before him. FBI Agent Ramirez stood in Veronica's office, his expression grave as he spoke through the glass walls. Jack couldn't hear the words, but he could read the tension in their postures. Veronica sat rigid at her desk, her usually composed face showing signs of strain. As Jack began to move past, Veronica's door opened. "Mr. Harlan," she called out, her voice carrying an edge of authority. "A moment, please." Jack wheeled his cart to the side and entered her office, trying not to feel self-conscious about his uniform among the elegant furnishings. Agent Ramirez turned to face him, his dark eyes assessing. "Mr. Harlan, I've heard about your quick thinking last night." "Just doing what seemed right, sir," Jack replied quietly. "What you did," Ramirez said, "was interrupt a sophisticated cyber attack. One that, according to our investigation, was just the first move in a larger operation." Jack's stomach tightened. "Larger operation?" Veronica stood, smoothing her tailored blazer. "The FBI believes we're dealing with an organized group, possibly with inside help. We've seen similar patterns at other tech companies," Ramirez explained. "They start with a test breach, then escalate. The fact that you stopped them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's likely put you on their radar." The weight of those words settled heavily on Jack's shoulders. He thought of Emily at home, probably working on her homework, waiting for him to return with takeout for dinner, their Friday tradition. "Should I be worried?" Jack asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "Concerned. Yes. Worried? That depends on how involved you plan to stay," Ramirez replied. "My advice? Let the professionals handle this from here." Veronica's heels clicked against the hardwood as she moved closer. "With all due respect, Agent Ramirez, Mr. Harlan has already proven himself valuable to this investigation. His perspective is unique." Jack caught the slight hesitation in her voice, wondering if she was thinking about those same whispers he'd overheard in the break room. "Miss Steele," Ramirez said firmly, "this isn't about corporate pride or proving points. These people are dangerous." The sun had begun to set by the time Jack finally clocked out, his mind churning with the day's events. The streets were quiet as he walked home, the familiar route now feeling somehow different. Each shadow seemed deeper, each rustle of leaves more ominous. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Emily, asking when he'd be home. But when he pulled it out, the number was unfamiliar. His blood ran cold as he read the message. "Stay out of this, or your daughter pays." Jack's hands trembled as he looked up toward his apartment building 3 blocks away. Emily's bedroom window glowed warm and yellow against the darkening sky, a beacon of everything he held dear, and everything he now realized he could lose. The phone felt like lead in his hands as the threat glared up at him, its words burning into his vision. The peaceful evening street suddenly felt exposed and threatening. Each passing car, each distant footstep seemed to carry menace. His daughter's window, usually a welcome sight after a long day's work, now filled him with a terrifying vulnerability. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, its soft rhythm doing nothing to calm Jack's racing heart. The phone lay on the wooden table before him, its screen dark now but the threatening message still burning in his mind. "Stay out of this, or your daughter pays." His calloused hands clenched and unclenched as he stared at the device, feeling more helpless than he had in years. The dim light from the single bulb above cast deep shadows across the cramped kitchen. Dishes from dinner still sat in the sink. He hadn't had the energy to wash them after getting that text. The familiar smell of dish soap and leftover spaghetti filled the air, but tonight these comforting scents brought no peace. Soft footsteps padded down the hallway. Jack quickly flipped the phone face down as Emily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Her long brown hair was tousled from sleep, and she wore the oversized t-shirt he'd gotten her at last year's carnival. "Dad?" she mumbled, squinting in the light. "What are you doing up?" Jack forced his features into what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "Hey, sweetheart. Just thinking about work stuff." The lie felt bitter on his tongue. He'd never hidden anything from Emily before. She shuffled to the table and slumped into the chair beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. The familiar weight of her trust made his chest ache. "Is something wrong?" she asked, more alert now. "You look worried." "Nothing's wrong, Em." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Just boring, grown-up stuff. You should be in bed. It's way past midnight." Emily lifted her head to study his face. She had her mother's eyes, keen and perceptive. "Is it about the hacker thing? Did something else happen?" Jack swallowed hard. How could he tell her that their whole world might be in danger because he'd tried to do the right thing? That someone was using her to threaten him? "Everything's fine," he said, hating himself for each false word. "I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. "Okay. But Dad? You know you can tell me anything, right? I'm not a little kid anymore." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She wasn't a little kid, she was growing up so fast, becoming more perceptive every day. But right now, that very maturity made him want to protect her even more fiercely. "I know, sweetheart. I know." He kissed the top of her head. "Come on, let's get you back to bed." Jack walked her to her room, tucking her in like he used to when she was smaller. Her walls still held the glow and the dark stars they'd stuck up together years ago. "Sweet dreams, Em." "Night, Dad," she murmured, already drifting off. Love you too, kiddo." Back in the kitchen, Jack paced the worn linoleum floor. His protective instincts warred with his fear. Should he go to the police? To Veronica Steele? But what if that only made things worse? The threat had been clear: stay out of it, or Emily pays the price. He barely slept that night, getting up every hour to check the locks on the doors and windows. When dawn finally broke, he made Emily's favorite breakfast: chocolate chip pancakes, trying to act normal as she chatted about an upcoming science test. Walking her to the bus stop felt different today. Jack's eyes scanned every shadow, every parked car, every stranger on the street. The phone felt heavy in his pocket, like a ticking bomb. He noticed details he'd never paid attention to before: the woman walking her dog on the opposite sidewalk, the delivery truck idling at the corner, the jogger passing by with headphones on. Emily skipped along beside him, her backpack bouncing, apparently oblivious to his tension. She was telling him about a group project in history class, her voice bright and animated in the morning air. Jack tried to focus on her words, to respond in the right places, but his attention kept darting to their surroundings. The yellow school bus appeared at the end of the street. Other kids were already gathering at the stop, parents waving goodbye before heading to work. Everything looked normal, too normal. Jack's hand instinctively touched the phone in his pocket again. Emily turned to give him their usual goodbye hug. "See you after school, Dad." Jack held her a moment longer than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Have a great day, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." She pulled away, giving him a curious look. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," he said, managing a smile. Just being a dad." Jack's mop made slow, methodical strokes across the executive floor's polished surface. His muscles worked on autopilot, while his mind churned with worry about Emily. The threatening text message felt like a weight in his pocket, making each movement heavier than usual. "Mr. Harlan?" He turned to find Veronica Steele standing in her office doorway. Her usual sharp business attire looked slightly rumpled, suggesting a long day of meetings. "Could you step into my office for a moment?" Jack propped his mop against the wall and followed her inside. The office was impressive: wall-to-wall windows overlooking the city lights, modern art on the walls, and a massive desk that probably cost more than his car. He remained standing, painfully aware of his gray uniform and worn work boots. "Please, sit." Veronica gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. When he hesitated, she added more firmly, "I insist." Jack lowered himself onto the edge of the chair, his hands clasped in his lap. Veronica didn't sit behind her desk as he expected, but took the chair next to his, turning it to face him. "First, I want to thank you personally," she began, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "What you did the other night, you saved this company millions of dollars and protected thousands of employees' personal information." "Anyone would have done the same," Jack mumbled, looking down at his hands. "No," Veronica said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have walked right past that laptop, assuming it wasn't their business. Your instincts were exceptional." She paused, studying his face. "The FBI has been investigating this attempted breach. Agent Ramirez believes this was just the first attack in a larger plan. He's requested your continued involvement in the investigation." Jack's head snapped up. "Ma'am, I appreciate the thought, but I'm just—" "If you say just a janitor one more time," Veronica interrupted, "I might lose my patience." She leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "You have something we need, Mr. Harlan. You notice things others miss. You understand this building's rhythms, who comes and goes, what's normal and what isn't. And most importantly, you've proven you can think quickly under pressure." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The phone in his pocket felt like it was burning against his leg. He should tell her about the threat, but what if that put Emily in more danger? "We're prepared to offer you security clearance," Veronica continued. "You'll maintain your current position as cover, but you'll be our eyes and ears on the ground. The FBI will brief you on what to look for." "I don't know," Jack said quietly. "This sounds dangerous." Veronica's expression softened slightly. "We'll provide protection, of course, for both you and your daughter." Jack's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know about my employees, Mr. Harlan, especially those who save my company." She smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Emily, isn't it? She must be very proud of you." Jack thought of Emily's beaming face when he'd told her about stopping the hack, but he also thought of that threatening text message. "She is," he said carefully. "That's why I need to think about this. I'm all she has." Veronica nodded slowly. "I understand. But consider this. By helping us catch whoever's behind this, you'll be protecting Emily, too. These people are dangerous, Mr. Harlan. They won't stop just because you step aside." The truth of her words hit him hard. She was right. He was already involved, whether he liked it or not. Running away wouldn't keep Emily safe. "I'll need time to arrange things with Emily," he said finally. "Make sure she's taken care of while I'm working different hours." "Of course." Veronica stood and walked to her desk, checking her watch. "It's nearly 8. Have you eaten?" Jack blinked at the sudden change of subject. "No, ma'am. I usually eat when I get home. The executive lounge is quiet this time of night," she said, gathering her purse. "They make excellent sandwiches. Join me?" Jack glanced down at his uniform, but Veronica was already heading for the door. "Don't worry about the dress code. I own the building, remember?" The executive lounge was nothing like the employee break room Jack usually used. Soft lighting illuminated comfortable seating areas and a small but well-equipped kitchen. Veronica moved behind the counter with familiar ease, pulling out bread and various ingredients. "I hope turkey is okay," she said, assembling 2 sandwiches. "I usually make my own here. The chef tries too hard with fancy ingredients." Jack watched in amazement as the CEO of SteelTech made him a sandwich. She worked with efficient movements, adding lettuce and tomato with the same precision she probably used in board meetings. They sat at a small table by the window, the city lights twinkling below. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. "Tell me about Emily," Veronica said suddenly. "What grade is she in?" "9th," Jack replied, surprised by her interest. "She's really smart, straight A's, even with me working nights and not being around as much as I should be." "That must be difficult," Veronica said quietly. "Balancing everything alone," Jack nodded, thinking of all the parent-teacher conferences he'd attended in his work uniform, all the school plays he'd barely made it to. "Her mother died when she was 6, cancer. Since then, it's just been us." "I lost my mother young, too," Veronica said, her voice distant. "My father worked constantly. I practically lived with our housekeeper." She smiled wryly. "At least Emily has a father who puts her first." For the first time, Jack saw past Veronica's polished exterior to the person underneath. He realized she was sharing something personal, creating a moment of connection between them. "You know," she continued, "I started as a junior programmer here. Everyone assumed I got the job because of my father's connections. It took years to prove myself." She met Jack's eyes. "I know what it's like to be underestimated, Mr. Harlan." "Jack," he said, "if we're going to be working together, you might as well use my first name." Veronica smiled, and this time it transformed her whole face. "Jack," she agreed. "And I'm Veronica." They finished their sandwiches, talking about Emily's dreams of college, Veronica's early days at SteelTech, and the strange paths that had led them both to this moment. For the first time since receiving that threatening text, Jack felt his shoulders relax. Whatever was coming, he wasn't facing it alone. The executive lounge felt strange at this hour. Jack sat across from Veronica at a gleaming mahogany table, security logs and employee files spread between them like a messy puzzle. The bright screen of Veronica's laptop cast a blue glow across their tired faces. These access attempts, Jack pointed to a highlighted section, they're always between 2 and 4 a.m. That's when the cleaning crew has the most access to restricted areas. Veronica leaned forward, her usual stern expression softened by exhaustion. Good catch, but how does that help us? Well, Jack shifted in his chair, still not used to having the CEO's full attention. Whoever's doing this knows our routines. It has to be someone who's here during the day, watching, learning patterns. He reached for his coffee cup, real ceramic, not the styrofoam ones from the break room, and took a careful sip. The premium roast was worlds better than his usual gas station brew. I've been watching too, he continued. There's this intern, Evan, real fidgety kid, always hanging around after hours, supposedly doing extra work. Veronica's eyebrows lifted. The one from It? Yeah. Thing is, he's not just working late, he's watching. I see him studying the security guard rotations, noting when people leave. Most folks, they just walk past us cleaners like we're invisible. But Evan, he pays attention to us. Too much attention. Jack remembered how the young man would pretend to be absorbed in his phone whenever the cleaning crew passed by, but his eyes would follow their movements. It was the kind of detail you noticed when you'd spent years being invisible. Yesterday, Jack continued, I was emptying trash bins near his desk. He was having a whispered conversation on his phone, something about payment confirmation and access codes. When he saw me, he jumped like he'd seen a ghost. Veronica pulled up Evan's employee file on her laptop. His ID photo showed a pale, nervous-looking young man with round glasses and messy dark hair. 20 years old, been here 3 months as an IT intern. Stellar recommendations from his professors. Perfect cover, Jack mused. Young, smart, eager to please. Nobody would suspect him. But why? Veronica rubbed her temples. The background check was clean. His family's comfortable. He's doing well in school. Sometimes it's not about need, Jack said quietly, thinking of the desperate choices he'd seen people make over the years. Sometimes it's about wanting to prove something, or someone making you feel special, important. Veronica studied him with newfound respect. You see a lot from behind that mop, don't you? Jack shrugged. When people think you're invisible, they forget to hide. They spent the next hour reviewing security footage. Sure enough, Evan appeared in multiple clips, always hovering at the edges, watching, waiting. In one video, he quickly pocketed something from another employee's desk while they were away. Look at his body language, Jack pointed out. Shoulders hunched, constantly looking over his shoulder. That's not just normal intern nervousness. He's scared of something. Veronica made some notes on her tablet. We'll need to be careful how we handle this. If he is involved and we spook him, we could lose our chance to catch whoever's really behind it. He's just a kid, Jack said softly. Someone's using him. I see it in his eyes. Same look my Emily gets when she's in over her head, but too scared to ask for help. Veronica's expression softened further. You really care about these people, don't you? Even the ones who might be trying to hurt the company? I've been cleaning up messes for a long time, Jack replied. Some are easier to fix than others, but every mess has a story behind it. They agreed to keep watching Evan closely. Jack would maintain his usual cleaning routine but pay special attention to the intern's activities. Veronica would quietly monitor his digital footprint without alerting IT security. As they packed up their materials, Veronica paused. Jack, I misjudged you. When all this started, I thought having a janitor involved in security matters was ridiculous, but you see things the rest of us miss. Jack felt his face warm at the compliment. Just doing my job, Miss Steele. Veronica, she corrected him. After all this, I think we can use first names. The walk home felt different that night. Jack's mind was busy processing everything they'd discovered about Evan, wondering how to help the young man before he destroyed his future. The streets were quiet, most windows dark, except for the occasional late-night TV glow. Something made him pause at the corner of Madison and Pine. A prickling sensation at the back of his neck. The kind of instinct you develop after years of working alone at night. He turned slowly, scanning the shadows. There, across the street, a figure stood perfectly still in the darkness between two buildings. Jack couldn't make out any features, just a darker shape against the black. He took a step forward, squinting to see better. The figure moved, melting backwards into the alley's depths like smoke dispersing in the wind. By the time Jack crossed the street, the space between the buildings was empty. Only the faint scuff marks on the ground suggested anyone had been there at all. The Saturday morning sun painted golden streaks across the park's worn benches and rusted swings. Jack watched Emily skip ahead of him toward the ice cream cart, her ponytail bouncing with each step. Her energy was contagious, but his smile felt heavy, weighed down by the threatening text message burning a hole in his pocket. "Can I get chocolate chip, Dad?" Emily called back, already fishing quarters from her jacket pocket. "Sure thing, sweetie." Jack quickened his pace to catch up, his eyes scanning the scattered families enjoying the weekend warmth. A mother pushed her toddler on the swings. Two elderly men played chess at a concrete table. Everything looked normal, but his newfound paranoia turned every stranger into a potential threat. The ice cream vendor, an older man with kind eyes and a graying mustache, handed Emily her cone with a grandfatherly smile. "And for you, sir?" "Just vanilla," Jack said, forcing himself to focus on this simple moment rather than the shadows lurking at the edges of his mind. They settled on a sunny bench facing the playground. Emily licked her ice cream with careful precision, making sure not to waste a single drop. Jack's vanilla began to melt, forgotten, as his eyes darted between passing joggers and dog walkers. "Dad?" Emily's voice pulled him back. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Looking around like you're scared something bad might happen." She lowered her cone, studying him with those perceptive eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Ever since that night at work, you've been different." Jack's throat tightened. He'd tried so hard to shield her from his worries, but Emily had always been too smart to fool. "I'm just being careful, that's all." "Because of the computer thing?" She shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his arm. "The kids at school were talking about it. They said Steel Tech almost got robbed or something." "It's complicated, sweetheart." Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. The ice cream in his other hand dripped onto his jeans, unnoticed. "But you stopped it, right? That's why everyone's being nice to you now." Emily's voice carried a mix of pride and concern. "Except something's still wrong. I can tell." Jack stared at his melting ice cream, wondering how much to share. Emily deserved some truth, but he couldn't burden her with the full weight of his fears. "Sometimes doing the right thing makes things complicated. Some people aren't happy that I got involved." "That's not fair." Emily sat up straighter, indignant. "You helped. They should be grateful." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees above them, carrying the distant laughter of children on the playground. Jack watched a leaf spiral down, landing in the grass at their feet. "Life isn't always fair, Em. But that doesn't mean we stop doing what's right. Is that why you look worried all the time now?" She pressed closer, her ice cream forgotten. "Are those people being mean to you?" Jack turned to face his daughter, seeing not just the teenager she was becoming, but glimpses of the strong young woman she would grow into. Her concern touched him deeply, even as it broke his heart that she had to worry about such things. "Emily," he began, choosing his words carefully, "remember when you were little and you were scared of monsters under your bed?" She rolled her eyes, but smiled. "Dad, I'm not a kid anymore." I know." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "But remember what I always told you? That you wouldn't let anything bad happen to me," she said softly. "That you'd always keep me safe." "That's right." Jack met her eyes, letting his love and determination show through. "Nothing's changed. Whatever happens, I'll keep you safe. That's a promise." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing his words. Then she surprised him by taking his free hand in hers. "But who keeps you safe, Dad?" The question hit him like a physical blow, reminding him of all the nights she'd waited up for him to return from work, all the times she'd insisted on making him breakfast when he was too tired to cook. Even now, she was trying to protect him in her own way. "I've got you looking out for me, don't I?" He managed a genuine smile, touched by her concern. "Always," she agreed firmly. "Just like Mom would want." The mention of her mother brought a familiar ache to Jack's chest, but also a surge of strength. His late wife had always believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost. She would have been so proud of their daughter. They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence, watching the park slowly fill with more weekend visitors. The morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces and casting shorter shadows across the grass. For a brief moment, Jack allowed himself to simply exist in this peaceful bubble with his daughter, pushing aside thoughts of threats and conspiracies. As they walked home, Emily slipped her hand into his, something she hadn't done in years. The gesture reminded him of when she was small, trusting him completely to guide her safely through the world. Now, somehow, she had become his guide too, her unwavering faith in him a beacon in the darkness. At their apartment door, Emily suddenly turned and wrapped her arms around him in a fierce hug. Jack held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You've always been my hero, Dad," she whispered against his chest. Jack blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. In that moment, he found his strength renewed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever threats he faced, he would face them with his daughter's love as his shield and armor. The midnight silence in Steel Tech's halls felt different tonight. Jack pushed his cleaning cart past the rows of dark offices, his footsteps echoing against the polished floors. The security badge Veronica had given him hung heavy around his neck, a reminder of his new responsibilities. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Down the dimly lit corridor, a shadow passed beneath the frosted glass doors of Research Lab 3. Jack's heart quickened. That area was strictly off-limits after hours, even to most senior employees. He left his cart and moved closer, careful to keep his steps quiet. Through the glass, he could make out a hunched figure at one of the computers. The blue screen light illuminated a familiar face. Evan, the young intern he'd been watching. Jack's hand hesitated over the door handle. The boy looked terrified, his fingers trembling as they flew across the keyboard. This wasn't the face of a hardened criminal. This was someone in over his head. Taking a deep breath, Jack pushed the door open. "Kind of late for overtime, isn't it?" Evan jumped, knocking over an empty energy drink can. His face went pale. "Mr. Harlan, I was just working on something that couldn't wait until morning?" Jack kept his voice gentle as he stepped inside. He'd seen that look before. The same desperate fear he'd witnessed in troubled kids from Emily's school when they were caught doing something they knew was wrong. "Please," Evan whispered. "You don't understand. I have to do this." Jack pulled up a chair next to the young man, maintaining enough distance not to seem threatening. "Try me, son. What's got you so scared that you're breaking into labs at midnight?" Evan's eyes darted to the door, then back to Jack. His shoulders slumped. "They said they'd ruin me if I didn't help them. My student loans, my mom's medical bills, they know everything about me." "The hackers?" Jack asked softly. A tear rolled down Evan's cheek. "They found me online 3 months ago. Said they could make all my problems go away. I just had to. Help them get some files." He wiped his face with his sleeve. "I didn't think it would go this far. They keep asking for more." Jack's heart ached for the kid. He thought about Emily, how vulnerable young people could be when they felt cornered. "Blackmail only works if you keep playing their game, Evan. Trust me, I've seen enough in my life to know that secrets eat you up inside." "But they'll destroy everything," Evan's voice cracked. "My mom, she needs her treatments. I can't let her down." "You're letting her down more by throwing your life away," Jack said firmly but kindly. "Think about it. What would hurt your mom more? Some temporary financial trouble, or seeing her son go to prison?" That hit home. Evan's face crumpled, and the tough facade of a cybercriminal melted away, leaving just a scared, 20-year-old kid. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he sobbed. "I just didn't see any other way out." Jack placed a steady hand on Evan's shoulder. "There's always another way. But first, you have to be brave enough to tell the truth." "Miss Steele will have me arrested," Evan whispered. "Maybe," Jack nodded. "But I know Veronica better now. She's tough, but she's fair. If you come clean, tell her everything about these people who are threatening you, she'll respect that. It might even help stop them from hurting anyone else." Evan stared at his hands for a long moment. The computer screen continued to flash behind him, waiting for commands he now seemed reluctant to give. Will you come with me? When I tell her? Of course I will. Jack smiled warmly. Let me make a call. 20 minutes later, they sat in Veronica's office. She'd arrived quickly, her usual power suit slightly rumpled, suggesting she'd been home when Jack called. Her face remained neutral as Evan, with occasional encouraging nods from Jack, poured out the whole story. He told them about the initial contact in an online forum, the gradual grooming process, how the hackers had pieced together personal information to pressure him. His voice shook as he described their escalating demands and threats. Throughout the confession, Jack watched Veronica's expression shift from stern to thoughtful. She asked sharp, precise questions, but never interrupted Evan's emotional moments. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, studying them both. What made you decide to tell me this tonight? She asked Evan. The young man glanced at Jack. Mr. Harlan. He talked to me like a person, not just some criminal. He made me realize I was throwing away my future by letting these people control me. Evan's voice steadied. I want to make this right. I'll tell the FBI everything I know about them. Veronica's eyes met Jack's, and he saw something new there, a warmth, an admiration that made his chest tighten. She turned back to Evan. What you did was serious, and there will be consequences. But your cooperation tonight will count for a lot. She stood up, straightening her jacket. I'm calling our security team and the FBI. Evan, you'll need to tell them everything you just told us. Jack, would you stay with him until they arrive? Yes, ma'am, Jack replied, seeing the gratitude in her small smile. As Veronica stepped out to make her calls, Evan looked at Jack with red-rimmed eyes. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me a chance to fix this. Jack squeezed the young man's shoulder. Everyone deserves a second chance, son. The hard part is being brave enough to take it. Through the office windows, he caught Veronica watching their interaction. Her face had softened, and something in her expression told him she was seeing him in a new light. Not just as the janitor who'd stopped a hack, but as someone who could reach people, understand them, help them find their way back to doing the right thing. The SteelTech boardroom buzzed with anticipation. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished oak table where executives sat shoulder to shoulder. Jack Harlan stood at the front, his cleaned and pressed janitor's uniform a stark contrast to the sea of expensive suits before him. Veronica Steele stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, what we're about to share will explain everything about the recent security breach and how it was stopped. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he distributed folders containing their evidence. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. A simple man who'd spent years invisible to these people, now standing before them as an equal. Thanks to Mr. Harlan's keen observation, Veronica continued, we identified not just the source of the breach, but prevented what could have been a catastrophic attack on our systems. She nodded to Jack, who cleared his throat. Evan Mills was just a kid who got in over his head, he explained, his voice steady despite his nerves. The real criminals were using him, threatening his family if he didn't help them access our servers. The board members leafed through the documentation as Veronica clicked through slides showing the evidence, late-night access logs, suspicious email trails, and the connection to a known cybercriminal organization. Mr. Harlan didn't just stop the initial breach, Veronica said, pride evident in her voice. He noticed patterns in Evan's behavior that our security team missed. He approached the boy with compassion, gained his trust, and helped him come forward before irreparable damage was done. The CFO raised his hand. And the external threat? The FBI has already arrested the masterminds, Veronica replied. Thanks to Evan's testimony and the evidence we gathered, the entire network has been exposed. Applause erupted in the boardroom. Jack stood straighter, warmth spreading through his chest, as executives who had once looked through him now met his eyes with respect. Some even stood to shake his hand. You've saved this company millions, the board chairman announced, perhaps billions, considering the potential damage to our reputation. SteelTech owes you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Harlan. Jack thought of Emily, imagining how proud she would be. All those years of working late shifts, of being invisible. Finally, people saw him as more than just a janitor. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of congratulations and handshakes. By early afternoon, Jack was ready to head home and share the good news with Emily. He stopped by his locker to gather his things when his phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Dad, check the news. Please call me." His stomach dropped. Opening his phone's browser, he found the breaking story already trending. Steel-Tech breach. Inside job. Questions arise about janitor's convenient heroics. The article was brutal. Anonymous sources suggested Jack had orchestrated the entire breach using Evan as a patsy. They questioned how a mere janitor could have spotted something security professionals missed. They even dug into his financial history, highlighting his struggle with bills as supposed motivation. His phone rang. "Veronica. Jack, I just saw it. Don't panic. We'll fight this." Before he could respond, a security guard approached. "Mr. Harlan, I need your badge. Company policy requires immediate suspension pending investigation of these allegations." Jack's hands moved automatically, unclipping the badge that had meant so much just hours ago. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Emily. "Kids at school are saying awful things. Someone's parent shared the article. They're calling you a fake hero. Please come get me." The security guard stood waiting, hand extended. Jack placed the badge in his palm, the same badge that this morning had represented his redemption. Now it felt like surrender. "I need to escort you out," the guard said, not unkindly. As they walked through the lobby, Jack noticed employees turning away, whispering behind their hands. The same people who'd congratulated him hours before now avoided his eyes. He thought of Emily, waiting at school, facing cruel words from classmates. His chest tightened. The guard held the door open. "I'm sorry about this, Mr. Harlan. For what it's worth, I believe you." Jack stepped out into the harsh afternoon sun, the glass doors of Steel-Tech closing behind him with a final sounding click. His phone kept buzzing. More news alerts, more articles, more damage. But all he could think about was getting to Emily, protecting her from the fallout of his brief moment in the spotlight. He walked away from the building, head held high despite the weight in his chest. The same sidewalk he'd walked thousands of times as an invisible janitor now felt different under his feet. He'd gone from hero to villain in the space of a few hours, but one thing remained constant. He was still Emily's father, and she needed him now more than ever. From somewhere above, he could hear the faint sounds of a board meeting continuing without him, life at Steel-Tech moving on as if he'd never been there at all. His footsteps quickened as he headed toward Emily's school, leaving behind the gleaming tower where, for one brief moment, he'd finally been seen. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, its steady rhythm punctuating the heavy silence. Jack Harlan sat hunched at the worn kitchen table, his calloused hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. The suspension letter from Steel-Tech lay before him, its crisp corporate letterhead a stark contrast to the pile of unpaid bills scattered across the table's scratched surface. Emily stood at the stove, the soft sizzle of butter on bread filling the dim kitchen with a comforting sound. Her movements were careful, practiced, just like her mother used to make them. The familiar smell of melting cheese briefly lifted the heaviness in the air. "Dad, you need to eat something," Emily said, sliding a perfectly golden grilled cheese sandwich onto a plate. She set it in front of him, then squeezed his shoulder. "Remember what you always tell me? Food makes everything better." Jack managed a weak smile, but his eyes remained fixed on the suspension letter. "Thanks, sweetheart. You should be in bed, though. It's way too late." "I'm not leaving you alone down here," Emily replied, pulling up a chair beside him. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with little stars that were starting to fade from too many washes. "And don't tell me you're fine." "I know you're not." The sandwich sat untouched, steam rising in thin wisps. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the kitchen walls before plunging them back into shadow. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the sky. "You know what they're saying isn't true, right?" Emily's voice was small but fierce. "About you planning the whole thing?" Jack's throat tightened. "I know, honey." He picked up half of the sandwich, taking a small bite to please her. The cheese stuck in his throat. But sometimes the truth isn't enough. Emily's face scrunched up with determination. Then we'll make it be enough. We can tell everyone what really happened. Miss Steele knows the truth. She saw everything. It's complicated, Jack sighed, pushing the plate away. There are people at Steel Tech who never wanted someone like me involved in the first place. A janitor in their boardroom? They're probably relieved to have an excuse to get rid of me. The first drops of rain began to hit the kitchen window, creating irregular patterns on the glass. Emily got up and made herself a cup of hot chocolate, the spoon clinking against the mug as she stirred, a sound that reminded Jack of countless late-night talks with his wife. "Remember when I was little," Emily said, settling back in her chair, "and those kids at school were making fun of me because my shoes were old? You told me that what other people think doesn't matter as long as we know who we are." Jack's eyes burned. "This is different, Em. Without this job." He gestured at the stack of bills, his hand trembling slightly. "The mortgage, your school supplies, everything. We'll figure it out," Emily insisted, reaching for his hand. "We always do." Thunder crashed closer now, and the kitchen lights flickered. Jack stood up, walking to the small shelf where they kept their family photos. His fingers found the silver frame holding Sarah's picture. His late wife's smile frozen in time, her eyes bright and determined, just like Emily's. The rain intensified. Drumming against the roof, Emily came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a tight hug. "Mom would be so proud of you, Dad. She'd know exactly what to say right now." Jack traced the edge of the photograph with his finger. Sarah had always been the strong one, the one who knew how to fight back. She would have known how to handle this situation, how to clear his name. But she wasn't here, and he felt lost without her compass. "I just wanted to do something that mattered," he whispered, his voice rough. "To be someone you could both be proud of. And now—" He gestured helplessly at the suspension letter on the table. "But you did do something that mattered," Emily protested. "You saved the company. You helped Evan. Just because some people don't want to believe it doesn't make it less true." Lightning flashed, illuminating the kitchen in stark white. In that brief moment, Jack caught his reflection in the window, tired eyes, slumped shoulders, the weight of defeat visible in every line of his face. The thunder that followed seemed to shake the very foundations of their small house. Emily tugged at his arm, trying to pull him back to the table. "Come on, Dad. Your sandwich is getting cold, and you know how gross cold grilled cheese is." But Jack couldn't move. The photograph held him there, Sarah's smile both comfort and accusation. He remembered her strength during her illness, how she never gave up fighting until the very end. He'd promised her he would stay strong for Emily, that he would give their daughter the life she deserved. The rain pounded harder, matching the rhythm of his thoughts. Bills to pay, a reputation in ruins, a daughter to protect. It all seemed impossible now, a mountain too steep to climb. Jack lifted the photograph, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. The kitchen lights flickered again, casting dancing shadows across Sarah's face. In the background, he could hear Emily putting away the dishes, trying to bring order to their small world even as it fell apart. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he whispered to Sarah's image, his voice barely audible above the storm. Thunder rolled outside as Jack stared at his wife's photograph on the kitchen wall. The steady drumming of rain against the windows matched his heavy thoughts. Emily had just finished wrapping the leftover grilled cheese in plastic wrap when 3 sharp knocks cut through the quiet house. Father and daughter exchanged worried glances. It was nearly midnight, too late for casual visitors. Jack moved protectively in front of Emily as he approached the door. Through the peephole, he saw a familiar figure holding a black umbrella, her designer coat glistening with raindrops. "Veronica?" Jack muttered in disbelief, pulling open the door. Veronica Steele stood on his modest front porch, looking somewhat out of place in her expensive attire. Her usually perfect hair was slightly damp at the edges, and her face showed signs of exhaustion. She lowered her umbrella, water dripping onto the welcome mat. "I'm sorry for coming so late," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it at work. "But this couldn't wait until morning." Jack hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. "Please, come in." Emily hung back in the kitchen doorway, watching with curious eyes as the CEO of SteelTech entered their small living room. The space suddenly felt smaller, more humble, under Veronica's presence. "Hello, Emily," Veronica said, offering a gentle smile that transformed her usually stern face. "Your father talks about you all the time at work." Emily's shy hello was barely above a whisper, but her eyes studied Veronica with interest. "Can I get you some tea?" Jack offered, falling back on basic hospitality to mask his uncertainty. "Or coffee? Tea would be lovely, thank you." Veronica's eyes swept over the living room, the worn but clean furniture, the school awards displayed proudly on the walls, the family photos that told the story of a loving home. Emily moved to the kitchen to help her father, while Veronica removed her wet coat and draped it carefully over the back of a chair. When they returned with the tea, she had pulled a thick folder from her briefcase. "I've been working late every night since your suspension," Veronica began, accepting the steaming mug. "Something about this whole situation didn't add up. The timing of the accusations, the convenient evidence that appeared out of nowhere." She paused, taking a careful sip. "Jack, I want you to know, I believe you're innocent." The words hung in the air like a lifeline. Emily, who had settled onto the couch next to her father, reached for his hand. "The board won't listen to me without concrete proof," Veronica continued, opening the folder. "But I've been digging. The article that accused you? It was planted by someone with access to our internal servers. Someone who wanted to discredit you quickly, before you could uncover more about the breach." Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding. "But why me? I'm just—" "If you say just a janitor one more time," Veronica interrupted with unexpected warmth, "I might have to throw this very nice tea at you." The comment startled a giggle out of Emily, and some of the tension in the room eased. "Dad's the bravest person I know," Emily said suddenly, her voice small but determined. "He works so hard, and he always helps people, even when they're mean to him." Veronica's expression softened as she looked at the teenager. "Your father is much more than his job title, Emily. He saw what highly paid security experts missed. He helped that young intern when everyone else would have just reported him. That's why they targeted him. Because he sees things others don't." Emily beamed with pride, and Jack felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm going to need your help," Veronica continued, spreading documents across the coffee table. "These are access logs, security reports, and communication records. There's a pattern here, but I can't quite see it. You have a way of noticing things that don't quite fit." For the next hour, they pored over the documents together. Emily, who had initially stayed quiet, began pointing out details that surprised both adults with their insight. Veronica engaged her directly, asking questions and listening intently to her observations. As the rain continued outside, the atmosphere in the small living room shifted. The CEO's pristine blazer was draped over a chair, her heels tucked neatly under the coffee table. She sat cross-legged on the carpet, sharing the last cookies Emily had baked while they worked through the papers. "It's getting late," Jack finally said, noticing Emily trying to hide a yawn. "You should get to bed, sweetheart." Emily hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave the excitement. To everyone's surprise, she gave Veronica a quick, impulsive hug before heading upstairs. "Thank you for believing in my dad," she whispered. Veronica looked touched by the gesture, her professional mask slipping for a moment. After Emily's bedroom door closed, she began gathering the documents. "I should go too," she said, glancing at her watch. "But Jack, I want you to know, I'm not giving up on this. We're going to clear your name." Jack walked her to the door, holding her umbrella while she put on her coat. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and the streetlights created halos in the mist. "Veronica," he said quietly, "thank you. Not just for this, but for treating Emily with such kindness. It means a lot to her, to both of us." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "You have a wonderful daughter, Jack. She reminds me that there are more important things than corporate success." She accepted her umbrella back, her fingers brushing his briefly. "I'll be in touch soon." Jack stood in the doorway watching as she walked to her car. The sleek vehicle seemed out of place on his modest street, just as its owner had seemed out of place in his home, and yet somehow she had fit. Her taillights disappeared into the misty night, and Jack closed the door slowly, his heart a jumble of gratitude and cautious hope. Sunday morning dawned with gentle rays breaking through the storm clouds that had dominated the previous days. Jack stood in front of his bedroom mirror, carefully knotting his worn blue tie. His fingers trembled slightly as they moved through the familiar motions. The tie had been a gift from his late wife, one of the last she'd given him before her passing. Emily appeared in the doorway, wearing her favorite yellow dress. She'd taken extra care with her appearance today, her brown hair neatly braided and secured with the butterfly clip her mother had loved so much. "Ready, Dad?" Jack managed a small smile. "Almost, sweetheart." He straightened the tie one last time, noting how the years had faded its once vibrant color, much like how recent events had dimmed his own spirit. Their small church sat just 3 blocks away, its white wooden steeple reaching toward the clearing sky. They'd been coming here every Sunday since Emily was a toddler. Even after Jack's night shifts left him exhausted, they never missed a service. The familiar walk today felt different somehow, heavier with the weight of recent events, yet somehow more necessary than ever. Mrs. Martinez, the elderly greeter, wrapped Jack in a warm embrace as soon as they entered. "Jack, mihijo," she said softly, her weathered hands patting his cheeks. "We've been praying for you." There was no judgment in her eyes, only compassionate understanding that made Jack's throat tight with emotion. The wooden pews creaked comfortingly as they settled into their usual spot, 5th row from the front, right side. Emily leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that had become more frequent lately, as if she sensed his need for support. Around them, familiar faces turned to offer encouraging smiles and gentle nods. Pastor Mike's sermon today focused on Daniel in the lion's den, a story about maintaining faith and integrity in the face of false accusations. Jack couldn't help but wonder if the topic had been chosen with him in mind. As the pastor spoke about standing firm in one's truth, several congregation members glanced meaningfully in Jack's direction. When it came time for prayer requests, Jack remained silent, but his heart spoke volumes. He didn't ask for his job back or for his name to be cleared, though both weighed heavily on his mind. Instead, he prayed for Emily. For her heart to stay strong, for her spirit to remain unbroken by the cruel whispers at school. He asked for the strength to be the father she deserved, even when the world seemed determined to break him down. Emily's hand found his during the prayer, squeezing gently. She'd always been perceptive, understanding more than she let on. Jack squeezed back, grateful for her unwavering faith in him. After the service, the congregation lingered as they always did. Mrs. Thompson, who taught Emily's Sunday school class, approached with a covered casserole dish. "For you both?" she insisted, pressing it into Jack's hands. "My mother's recipe. It always brought comfort during hard times." Mr. Rodriguez, a retired police officer who'd been attending the church for decades, clasped Jack's shoulder firmly. "This too shall pass, brother. We know who you are." One by one, church members approached. Some with food, others with words of encouragement or simple hugs. Each interaction reinforced what Jack had temporarily forgotten. His worth wasn't measured by his job title or public opinion, but by the content of his character and the love he gave his daughter. Miss Sarah, the choir director who'd helped Emily through her first solo last Christmas, pulled Jack aside. "Sometimes," she said softly, "God allows us to be stripped of everything except what matters most. It's in these moments we discover our true strength." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He watched as Emily chatted with her friends from youth group, her smile genuine despite everything. She'd shown more resilience than he could have hoped for, staying strong even when classmates repeated the cruel headlines about him. As the congregation slowly dispersed, Pastor Mike approached. He didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. Instead, he simply said, "Your daughter still looks at you the same way she always has, Jack. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The truth of those words settled deep in Jack's heart. Through all of this, Emily's faith in him hadn't wavered for a moment. Perhaps that was the greatest testament to his innocence. that the person who knew him best still believed in him completely. They stepped out of the church into the late morning sunlight. The air felt clearer somehow, as if the storm clouds of the past few days had taken some of his doubt with them when they departed. The simple brick building behind them had always been a sanctuary, but today it had been something more, a reminder that he wasn't facing this challenge alone. Emily slipped her small hand into his as they descended the church steps. Her touch carried the same certainty it had since she was small, the same unconditional love that had helped him through his darkest days after losing her mother. "You're not alone, Dad," she said simply, echoing the message the congregation had shown them today. Veronica Steele strode into the SteelTech boardroom with purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where 12 board members sat in expectation. She carried a sleek laptop under one arm and a thick manila folder in the other. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her, "I've called this emergency meeting to address a grave injustice committed against Jack Harlan." Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Richard Morton, the chief financial officer, cleared his throat. "Miss Steele, we've been through this. The evidence against Harlan was fabricated," Veronica cut in sharply. She opened her laptop and connected it to the room's projection system. "And I can prove it." The screen behind her flickered to life, showing security camera footage from the executive floor. The timestamp read 2:15 a.m., 3 days before Jack had discovered the initial breach. The footage showed Morton entering his office well after hours, an unusual occurrence for someone who prided himself on strictly maintaining 9 to 5 hours. "What is the meaning of this?" Morton demanded, his face flushing red. "Please watch," Veronica said coolly. The footage continued, showing Morton inserting a thumb drive into his computer. Split-screen footage appeared, showing his computer activity captured by the system's security protocols. Lines of code scrolled across his screen as he initiated what would later become the breach that Jack had stopped. Gasps echoed around the table. Morton jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous! You can't possibly—" "I can and I will," Veronica interrupted. She opened the manila folder and began distributing documents. "These are bank statements showing transfers from offshore accounts to Mr. Morton's private account. The dates correspond exactly with the attempted breach and the subsequent smear campaign against Jack Harlan." The board members leafed through the papers, murmuring in disbelief. Morton's face had gone from red to pale. "There's more," Veronica continued, clicking to the next piece of evidence. "This is an email chain between Mr. Morton and Victor Petrov, a known cyber criminal. They planned this breach months ago. The goal was to steal proprietary technology and sell it to our competitors." She turned to face Morton directly. "When Jack Harlan stopped the breach, you panicked. You couldn't risk him discovering more, so you orchestrated his downfall. You planted false evidence, spread rumors, and destroyed an honest man's reputation to save yourself." Morton's lawyer, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. "These are serious accusations, Miss Steele. Do you have proof that my client—" Veronica pressed play on another video. This time, it showed Morton in a parking garage, meeting with a man whose face was now plastered on FBI wanted lists. The audio was crystal clear. "The janitor's becoming a problem," Morton's voice rang out. "Plant the evidence. Make it look like he was the inside man all along. I don't care how you do it, just get it done." The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Morton slumped in his chair, defeated. "But that's not even the worst part," Veronica continued, her voice growing thick with emotion. She clicked to one final piece of footage. "This is from last week. After we suspended Jack Harlan without pay, after we dragged his name through the mud, after we made his daughter ashamed to go to school." The new footage showed Jack, still coming to the building every night, not to work, he couldn't, but to check on the elderly security guard who had been having heart problems. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. as Jack helped the man take his medication, kept him company, and even brought him homemade soup that his daughter had made. "This is who we accused of betraying us," Veronica said, her voice trembling slightly. A man who, even after we treated him so poorly, still comes back to help others. A man who saved our company not for glory or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. She turned to face the board members, many of whom couldn't meet her gaze. Jack Harlan saved this company, and we tried to destroy him. The board members sat in stunned silence, the weight of their collective failure hanging heavy in the air. The truth had finally come to light, but the damage they had done to a good man's life couldn't be so easily undone. In the corner, Morton's head was bowed, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. But Veronica wasn't finished. She stood tall, her voice carrying the authority of her position and the conviction of her heart. The truth was out, and now justice would follow. The SteelTech atrium buzzed with energy as employees filled every available space. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, casting a warm glow over the gathered crowd. Jack Harlan tugged at his new Navy suit, a gift from Emily, purchased with her carefully saved allowance. The fabric felt strange against his skin after years of wearing a janitor's uniform. "Stop fidgeting, Dad," Emily whispered beside him, smoothing his lapel. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and she wore her favorite yellow dress. Pride radiated from her smile. At the podium, Veronica Steele commanded attention in her crisp white blazer. Her voice carried across the atrium with authority. "Today, we right a wrong," she began, her eyes finding Jack's in the crowd. "And more importantly, we recognize extraordinary character." Jack's hands trembled slightly. Emily squeezed his arm, grounding him in the moment. He thought of all the nights he'd walked these same floors alone, mop in hand, invisible to the world. Now hundreds of eyes were fixed on him. "Jack Harlan didn't just save our company from a cyber attack," Veronica continued. "He showed us what integrity looks like. When others doubted him, he stayed true to his principles. When faced with threats, he chose courage. And when given the chance to help someone who'd made mistakes," she glanced at Evan, the former intern who sat reformed in the front row, "he chose compassion." A warm murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jack noticed several janitors in their uniforms standing together near the back, watching with newfound hope in their eyes. His old colleagues, his friends. "Please join me in welcoming Jack Harlan back to SteelTech," Veronica announced, "not just as an employee, but as our new head of employee integrity and security." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. Emily's clapping rose above it all, her enthusiasm infectious. Jack felt tears prick at his corners of his eyes as he made his way to the podium. Each step carried the weight of his journey from invisible man to honored leader. Veronica handed him his new security badge, then surprised him by pulling him into a brief hug. "Welcome back," she whispered. Jack approached the microphone, his heart pounding. He'd never spoken to a crowd this size before. But when he looked out at the sea of faces, he saw something he'd never expected: respect. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "You know, for years I cleaned these floors at night hoping to give my daughter a better life. I never imagined standing here like this." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But what I've learned is that every job has dignity. Every person has value, and sometimes the best view of what's really going on comes from the ground up." Scattered chuckles and nods of appreciation followed his words. In the front row, Emily beamed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "In my new role, I promise to remember that, to see the worth in every employee, no matter their position. Because security isn't just about systems and protocols, it's about people, making them feel safe, valued, and heard." More applause erupted. Jack saw some of the executives who'd once dismissed him now nodding in approval. Even the most skeptical board members seemed moved. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded them. Employees Jack had never spoken to came forward with congratulations. His former janitorial team presented him with his old mop, playfully decorated with ribbons. "Keep it in your new office," his old supervisor winked. "Remember where you came from." Through it all, Emily stayed close, watching her father finally receive the recognition she'd always known he deserved. When the crowd thinned, Veronica approached them again. "Your office is ready whenever you'd like to see it," she said warmly. "Though I imagine you might want to celebrate with your daughter first." Jack looked down at Emily, who could barely contain her excitement. The morning sun caught the silver threads in his dark hair as he smiled at his daughter. He took her hand, feeling the familiar softness that had always given him strength. "Looks like we've got a new chapter, kiddo," he whispered. Emily's face lit up with joy and vindication. "Told you you're a hero," she said, squeezing his hand tightly. The words hung in the air between them, a truth that had always been there, finally recognized by the world. The invisible janitor had become visible at last, not just as a hero, but as himself, Jack Harlan, a father who had never stopped believing in the power of honest work and unwavering love. The morning sun streamed through Steel Tech's windows as Jack Harlan walked down the familiar corridors, his new security badge gleaming on his chest. In his hands, he still gripped the worn handle of his trusty mop. The smooth marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights above, just as they had for all those years he'd worked in shadows. "Good morning, Mr. Harlan," called Sarah from accounting, waving as she passed. "Just Jack," he replied with a warm smile, still getting used to the greetings. A few weeks into his new position as head of employee integrity and security, and it still felt surreal. He paused by a window, studying his reflection. The same weathered face looked back at him, but something had changed in his eyes. There was a quiet confidence there now, replacing the doubt that had lived there for so long. The elevator dinged, and Jack turned to see Emily bouncing out, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her school was just a few blocks away, making it easy for her to visit after classes. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Dad!" She rushed over, nearly knocking over his mop bucket. "How's the new office? Did you hang up the picture I drew yet?" Jack chuckled, steadying the bucket. "Right next to my desk, kiddo. Want to see?" They walked together down the hall, Emily chattering about her day. Employees smiled and nodded as they passed, some stopping to say hello. Jack noticed how Emily stood a little taller now, no longer trying to hide behind him like she used to. His new office wasn't large, but it had a window, something he'd never dreamed of having. Emily's crayon drawing of him in a superhero cape hung proudly on the wall, right next to his framed security certification. "I still can't believe you have a real desk," Emily said, spinning in his chair. "With a computer and everything?" "Neither can I sometimes," Jack admitted, leaning his mop against the wall. "But you know what? I still do my rounds with this old friend." He patted the mop handle. "Keeps me grounded, helps me notice things others might miss." Emily stopped spinning, her expression serious. "You're not embarrassed about still being a janitor sometimes, are you, Dad?" Jack shook his head, pulling up a spare chair next to her. "Not anymore, sweetheart. This mop helped me save the company, remember? Besides, there's no shame in honest work. Any work that helps others has value." A knock at the door made them both look up. Veronica Steele stood in the doorway, her usual professional demeanor softened by a gentle smile. "I thought I heard voices in here. Hello, Emily." "Hi, Miss Steele," Emily beamed. Over the past few weeks, she'd grown comfortable around the CEO, especially after Veronica had started bringing her favorite chocolate chip cookies to meetings. "Please, I've told you it's Veronica." She stepped into the office, carrying a folder. "Jack, I was wondering if you and Emily would like to join me on the roof. The sunset's beautiful today, and I have something I'd like to discuss." Jack exchanged a look with Emily, who nodded eagerly. "Lead the way," he said, grabbing his mop out of habit. The rooftop garden was one of Steel Tech's hidden treasures. Potted plants and comfortable benches created a peaceful oasis above the busy city. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the garden. Emily immediately ran to the railing, pointing out landmarks below. "Look, Dad, I can see my school from here." Veronica settled onto a bench, patting the space beside her. Jack sat down, propping his mop against the bench's arm. "What's on your mind?" he asked. She opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers. "The board approved my proposal. We're implementing a company-wide mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with newcomers, teaching them about integrity, security, and most importantly, treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position." "That sounds wonderful," Jack said, watching Emily as she explored the rooftop garden. "I want you to help lead it," Veronica continued. "Your story, Your perspective. It's exactly what this company needs. What do you say?" Before Jack could respond, Emily called out, "Dad, come look at this view." He stood, offering his hand to Veronica. Together, they joined Emily at the railing. The city sprawled before them, windows catching the golden light. Emily stood between them, her face glowing with contentment. "Remember when you used to hide me under your desk when you had to work late?" Emily asked, leaning against his arm. "Now look at us." Veronica laughed softly. "Your fathers taught us all some valuable lessons about looking beyond titles and appearances." Jack wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over him. The same city stretched out before him that he'd looked at through windows he'd cleaned 1,000 times, but now everything felt different. Not because of his new title or office, but because he'd finally learned to see himself through his daughter's eyes. Emily pointed to a flock of birds soaring past. "They look so free up here." "They sure do, kiddo," Jack agreed, his hand resting on his mop handle. The simple tool that had once seemed like a symbol of his limitations now reminded him that even the most ordinary things could become extraordinary in the right moments. The three of them stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in ever-changing colors. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the rooftop flowers, and somewhere below, the city hummed with life. Jack looked at his daughter's smiling face, at Veronica's quiet contentment, and thought about all the twists and turns that had led them here. Veronica's laugh broke the silence, as Emily told her about Jack's attempt at making pancakes that morning. The sound mingled with the evening air, natural and unguarded. Jack smiled, gazing at the golden horizon stretching endlessly before them, thinking, even janitors can save the world. The setting sun bathed them all in its warm golden light, a perfect ending to an imperfect journey. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Harlan, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.